All right, guys. Well, if I do not know you, what a shame. My name is Mr. Anderson. I teach geometry and some algebra courses here at Mount Perrin. I've taught a lot of you, some I have not taught. And I do a talk in my geometry class that not all of you get to hear. So Mr. S asked me to share the talk that I do, and happy to do that. So I'm going to kind of show how geometry and God, um, really just how math and God are intertwined. And the more that you know about math, um, the more you can kind of appreciate what God does. So I have this little diagram here: God plus geometry equals the smiley face. We'll see if you guys are smiling at the end here. So in geometry, we have different dimensions. Okay, you have things that are 1D, 2D, 3D, and you've kind of talked about that before. If I say something is 1D, one dimensional, that would be something like a line. Okay, a line is 1D, and a line has length. Length. So a line has one dimension, and that is length. Okay, a line technically has no width; it just goes straight across like this, and there's technically no width to it. And then before 1D, there's actually something even more basic, which is 0D. 0D is simply a, you guessed it, or maybe didn't, it's a point. Okay, so a point is 0D. A point, all that a point does do all that a point does is it denotes location. So it's not really a circle, it has no length, it has no width, it just denotes location. But here's the interesting thing about geometry: is geometry follows this pattern. As I go from one dimension to the next dimension to the next dimension, it follows this one pattern. So for instance, if I was trying to go from 0D to 1D, how would I do that? Well, I would take the zeroth dimension, 0D, which is a point, and then I would line them up and do an infinite amount of points. And if I do that, if I line this up and do an infinite amount of points, I create a line, which I just did. Cool. All right, well, let's follow that pattern and continue it. So let's go to 2D. How will I correct, what does something two-dimensional look like? Well, let's follow that same pattern. So if I'm trying to go from 1D to 2D, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this line, and then I'm just going to keep making lines over and over and over and over and over again. And what you actually end up making, and here's a segment of it, what you end up making is not only do you have length right here, length, that's what that says, believe it or not, but you also have width. That's what you've created. So the third dimension is width. width. There you go. Yeah, so how do I go from 1D to 2D? I take a line and extend it over and over again. Technically, it makes a plane. A plane would be infinitely left and right, infinitely up and down. But let's take a portion of it. We'll say something like a rectangle. A rectangle has length and it has width. So we've gone to 2D. Awesome. All right, well, let's continue here. So I've gone from 0D to 1D, 1D to 2D. Let's go from 2D to 3D. So if you think about it, let me write this in blue. 3D. Okay, I'm trying to go from two-dimensional to three-dimensional. Well, what you're going to do is you're going to take this rectangle, and then you're going to stack rectangles. I'm going to take that rectangle and infinitely keep going. Just infinitely keep stacking rectangles over and over and over again. And not only now do I have length and width, I now have depth, or we can say height. So what I've really created here, let me erase all this. I've created something like a cube. Something that's 3D has three dimensions. It has length, length, width, and height. I'll just abbreviate. So our third dimension is height or depth, whichever one you do. H-E-I-G-T. Did I spell that right? H-E-I. I can't spell. All right, height. I'm going to Google it real quick. I know how to spell it, but it's the end of the day, and I'm tired, and my brain's fried, and I teach numbers. H-E-I-G-H-T. I thought so. GHT. There we go. Cool. All right. So again, all we did was take a rectangle, stack a bunch of rectangles. If you think about it, I got some papers here. If I take a paper, can you guys see that? There you go. And then I stack another paper, and then I stack another paper. I'm going to create a rectangular prism. Cool. So, and that's what we did here. I just stacked all these. I've made a solid. Now, here's where it gets weird. How do I go from 3D to 4D? Well, that's 4D is kind of weird. We know kind of 1D through 2D, 3D, but how do I go to 4D? Well, we're going to follow the same pattern I just told you about. So I'm going to take this cube, okay, and then I'm going to stack these cubes on top of each other. So I'm just going to keep stacking an infinite amount of cubes over and over again. Okay, well, that's easy to do, but what is that? Does that make any sense? What is that thing? Well, what the fourth dimension is time. So what the fourth dimension is, give me 1 second. Let me get my visual here, the cube. What the fourth dimension is this cube at different moments in time. Right now, right now, right now. And you can see that as we're going across this timeline here, it would be this cube at different times, over and over and over again. And 4D is just kind of interesting. If you think about it, when it comes to time, we view time kind of like a line. You've done a timeline before. Timeline. And I would say more specifically, if you're taking geometry, more specifically, we kind of view it as a ray. So instead of a timeline, we'll say a time ray, correct? We're born, okay? Here's us having this conversation now. If this is your timeline, born, conversation now, you're going to die one day. Sorry, guys, it happens. And then you go somewhere for the rest of your life. That was a weird laugh. But anyways, so our life is kind of like a timeline or a ray. And if you think about it, okay, we as humans, we're just really boring. Like we're born and then time starts moving and it doesn't slow down and it just keeps creeping forward. And we can't help it. It just keeps going forward. We can't go backwards, right? And we're constricted to this line. So why am I giving you a big geometry lesson in your Bible class with Mr. S? Well, here comes the interesting thing. We, as humans, like I said, are boring. We view time here as this ray. We're constricted to it. We can't do anything with it. We view time as 1D, right? Go back to this guy right up here. We view time as length. That's it. Just 1D. Well, if you think about it, it says in the Bible that God's thoughts and ways are higher than us. Well, what if what that means is his thoughts and ways are higher dimensionally? What if God doesn't view time as a line? Well, what if God viewed time as 2D, as length and width? Well, let's go back to our diagram here. If God viewed time as 2D, then he is not constricted to just this line. He can move all the way around. So if he wants to, since he doesn't have to stay on this line and keep moving forward, if God wants to, he not only has length, he has this width up here, meaning he could jump from this point to this point. Okay? He could also think about this. What if, I don't know, let's say this is us having this conversation right here. So let's say that from your birth to here is about 14 years. Okay? Well, if he wanted to, he could make his 14 years, he could make it perpendicular to this point right here. And he could say, hey, I'm going to spend 14 years at this one moment in history. You know, if you think about it, it's like, how does God answer all of the prayers? How does he hear everybody at one time? Because time is a human thing. Time doesn't apply to God. Time can, if God wants to, he can jump to this point in history. He can jump back to our past if he wants to. He can jump to the future. And that's only if God views time as length and width, meaning he's not constricted to this line here, but he's able to move up and down also. Now think about this. What if God, now that's only if God views time as 2D, okay? What if God viewed time as 3D? So instead of just as a rectangle, he views time as a solid where it's length, width, and height, all three of those at the same time. and this is just me thinking. This isn't, we don't know this for sure. We don't know anything I've said for sure. This is just my opinion. But if God views time as 3D, not 1D or 2D, then that would mean God is actually present at all aspects of your life at the same time. I know, crazy. So that would mean that God is right now with you at your birth. He is right now here in this room while we're having this conversation. He's also with you at heaven, in heaven, all at the same time. He's also dying on the cross for you right now, all at the same time. Which means to God, there is no past, there is no future. He is omnipresent. He is only in the present, which is just crazy stuff to think about. So I tell you all this because if you ever have geometry and you learn about a point, a line, the area of a rectangle, the volume of a cube, all of that stuff actually pertains to how does God view time, which is just crazy to think about. So I hope you can't sleep tonight. I hope you just stay awake thinking, what have I learned? But yeah, that's about it. We'll see you later.